friends. Welcome to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn. Today, my guest is Dr. Terianne Harrison, MFT. Terianne has been a therapist in private practice since 2010. She works with families, couples, and individuals specializing in grief and trauma, adoption, and familial issues. She is married to a therapist, and they are parents to 4 adult children and grandparents of a 9-month-old beautiful boy. Well, welcome, Dr. Terianne Harrison. I'm going to call you Terianne because you are my personal therapist. I have known you for approximately 1 year, and I am incredibly grateful that you were able to accept me as your client because you, I have to say, saved me on many different levels this entire year. Terianne, welcome.
No, thank you. And I'm honored to be your therapist and I'm honored to be here with you.
Good. Well, I hope that we can share with the audience some of the greatness that you have brought to my life and what some morsels of advice on having people reach out for therapy and understand that it is not a shameful thing to reach out for help. In fact, it will probably help people more than they actually know. One of the questions I really want to ask you, and I think is really important because not all therapists are created equal. And some people get in it for the wrong reasons or reasons that probably aren't really to make connections with other people. So, how is it that you became a therapist? What led you there?
Well, there are a lot of things that led me there, but I think the strongest motive for me was recognizing that there's a real need in our community for mental health care. There aren't enough therapists to go around as anybody who is actively seeking therapy right now finds they're on a long wait list. So I just felt like it was a good way for me to give back to my community. I've done many things in my life, and this seemed like the culmination of a lot of different ideas and interests that I had. So,
So,
yeah.
what are some of the benefits of seeking therapy when you need it most? And actually, just I mean, maybe not even when you need it most, but just for any kind of life situation that's going on. What are some of the benefits for seeking therapy?
Gosh, I'm just going to touch on the fact that waiting till you need it the most is probably not the safest bet because, as I said before, getting in to see somebody isn't always easy. But if you have an established relationship with a therapist, you're good to go when the shit hits the fan, so to speak.
Right.
The benefits are just exponentially massive. It's a safe space to talk about your feelings and struggles without worrying that other people are going to get a second or third hand version of that. A therapist really works to get to the root of issues and help you work through things that with strategies and ideas that you might not have come up with on your own. This is a little different than working things through with friends, which is also valuable. I mean, having good friends around to give you advice and to commiserate with you is a really good thing. A therapist doesn't really do that, though. A therapist really tries to get you to look at things from a more holistic point of view. If you can find new ways to look at your experiences and your relationships, then you can deal with issues that come up a lot better.
Yeah, that's the connection that I feel like I have with you. When I met you, I didn't know you at all, and you probably know me better, way better now, because we meet on a pretty regular basis. And I feel like you have unraveled some things that have happened in this last year that I don't know how I would have gotten through without you. Like I felt like I was tumbling through this entire breast cancer journey, and I'm still in my breast cancer journey. Let's be
Mhm.
clear, I am still healing and I still have a lot of things to work through, including with my husband. You know, I know that you encouraged my husband and I to seek out marriage counseling, because when it all comes down to it, he's part of my journey.
Right.
And sometimes there's some serious misunderstandings, like understanding what's going on in my heart and in my head. And then, of course, I have to understand what's going on with him. So, different therapists for different reasons. I like the
Right.
fact that I've got you that I can talk to myself. And then
Mhm.
we have another therapist that my husband and I go to, that we can talk out things that are going on in our lives. That I just know that with caregivers, there's such a high percentage of couples that don't even stay together
Right.
during an illness like this, because people don't know how to deal with it. And I'm
Mhm.
pretty lucky that I have someone who is tumbling through it with me. Sometimes it's very, very messy and scary,
Sure. Sure.
but he's also willing to seek that counseling. So, what is it that people should be looking for when they are choosing a therapist?
Right. Well, I mean, the first thing to recognize is it's not one size fits all. That right out of the gate is important. And if you meet with a therapist and you don't really feel a connection with that therapist, I recommend going at least twice. But sometimes you don't need two visits to recognize you just don't feel comfortable. And don't be afraid to say that, because it's not about the therapist's ego, it's about your needs, and you're being comfortable enough to talk about what you need to talk about. You need to feel comfortable with the person, because if you don't, then you're going to be really reluctant to talk about things that are difficult. And that's not therapeutic. If there's a therapist that you align with who has worked, say, with other cancer patients before, that's helpful. Depending on what you're seeking, if you're dealing with trauma or grief, finding a therapist who has experience and education in that realm is really important. And there are a lot of different modalities for therapy. So it's kind of like being in a candy store, just trying one thing and seeing if it works. And if it doesn't work, then maybe moving on to try something else. But just recognizing that you need to feel comfortable, you need to feel an affinity toward the person that you're talking about hard stuff with.
Right. And I've gone to quite a few therapists throughout my life, really.
Okay.
And my husband and I have gone to therapy throughout our whole marriage. We've brought our kids to therapy for certain things. And we have run across therapists that are really nice, and they have a lot of good intentions and advice and things like that, but the connection wasn't necessarily there. And when it all comes down to it, therapists are human beings. We all are human
Yes.
beings, and that human connection has to be there. And so I'm grateful that you and I have a really good connection. I had a therapist going all the way through the death of my mother and
Mhm.
moving forward, all the way until probably, I think I was seeing her maybe until the beginning of last year. And I loved her. She was great. She really got me through the grieving of my mother. And then also COVID. Oh my gosh. We both got each other
Yeah.
through that. And she and I had a wonderful connection. When the breast cancer came along, because this is going to go into our next question about people who have diagnoses like cancer or any major illness, and the
Right.
importance of people reaching out for that help. I knew at the beginning of my diagnosis that I was in such a deep, dark depression, like super dark, different dimension. Like I didn't even know where I was, what was going on. And
Yeah.
I just remember my really good friend referred me to you. And I was grateful that you accepted me as your client, like I said at the beginning. And what I like about you, Terianne, is that you are very action driven. You have advice on action steps that I can take from circumstance to circumstance. And instead of just sitting there talking about stuff, we can talk about stuff all day long. You and I could be friends on the outside. And I just know that about us, just because that connection that we have. But when it
Mhm.
comes down to it, as my therapist, you have ideas on what I can do to get through certain things. So I really appreciate that. And when people have a diagnosis for cancer or any other illness,
Mhm.
it's scary. And
Yeah.
there are all kinds of different phases that you go through. I went through the dark depression, fear, all of that. And I needed that extra support. So, what are your thoughts on people actually seeking therapy when they get a diagnosis like that?
Well, I think it's as important as chemotherapy in many ways. I mean, maybe that's a little bit dramatic, but it's very important because I think that, as you just pointed out, you have a lot of fears, a lot of dark thoughts, a lot of things that are going on inside of you. And sometimes it's really hard to be able to share that with close family and friends. I think in the past, I have had some cancer patients talk to me about, help me die, help me. I accept that I am going to die. Help me do it. Help me process my feelings. Help me deal with my family, because not only are you dealing with your diagnosis and your feelings about what's going on, but you're also dealing with the feelings of those around you, whether it's a husband, children, friends, colleagues, whatever. Your head's kind of pinging place. And I think that talking about those things with friends kind of becomes off limits in a way. People get scared, as you probably have experienced, and I know that you have. You lose some friends who
Mhm.
suddenly kind of disappear out of your life, and that's a really terrible feeling on a good day. But when you're dealing with a cancer diagnosis, it's awful. It's just one of many losses that you're facing. And I think that a therapist and therapy can add an additional layer of support for you, for family members. I mean, I think it's something that an entire family should seek therapy for it. So the fact that you and your husband are both actively working on your marriage at the same
Mhm.
time that you're dealing with your diagnosis, it's really important. You're not the same person that you were a year ago. Your journey is different, your thought processes are different, and having a healthy therapeutic relationship is part of that journey. I try not to give advice. When you talk about me being action oriented, I like that. But in terms of advice, I think I can lay the groundwork for you, but you're the one who has to do the work. You've openly really tried to apply what we talk about to your circumstances and to what's happening with your cancer and everything that goes with it.
Right. I like that. I think that there's a lot of people who, and I don't want to say whether it's just men or just women, because I mean, that's kind of a blanket statement, but there are a lot
Right.
of people who say things like, I'm fine. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to power through this. I'm going to stay strong. I got this, or we got this, or whatever. And that just kind of eliminates the possibility of walking into and through emotions. And I don't think that's healthy. I think that it's more healthy to acknowledge what's going on, acknowledge your feelings, what's going on in your heart and in your mind, and really allowing yourself to walk into it and through it, and then coming out the other side and moving from there. I want to say that my husband yesterday, this was really interesting. My husband is a very, very kind and loving and empathetic person. I think he's actually more empathetic now going through this journey with me. There are times where he definitely has not shown that empathy. He shows like that tough guy. We're going to get through this one day at a time and we got this, we
Right.
got this. But there are times where I think that he realizes that no, I don't necessarily got this, not all by myself. And I actually do have a lot of feelings. And so yesterday, we have been tumbling through some things even recently. Yesterday, he posted on social media a timeline of what had been going on with me from last June 11th when I got my diagnosis, and had all of these wonderful things to say about me. That was the first time he's really even posted something like that for the world to see, and showed me how much he loves me and what he is recognizing of what I've gone through. And he's also recognizing all the things that he has been able to accomplish through this whole entire journey as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just opening up to the understanding that this was and is a big, big deal. So
Yes.
that is really cool to see.
And Jamie, I think it's really important to recognize that a cancer diagnosis is not limited to the person who gets the diagnosis. Your diagnosis was also your husband's diagnosis. It was your sibling's diagnosis in a different sort of realm. Everybody's got processing and fear to deal with. And sometimes it takes a while for that to be expressed in a healthy way. People get angry, people become distant, some people walk away. But really, hopefully most loved ones will stay in it and recognize that their fear is valid, but it's just fear, it's just a feeling, and you can still fight the battle together in spite
Right.
of the feelings.
Yeah. And to be able to identify those feelings, like you said, be okay with it. Like, this is part of the journey. No one gets out of this kind of situation without having that fear and anxiety. You go through it all. I was just talking about this today with one of my former students about how people think that women are overly emotional or dramatic or whatever. And I'm just like, that is just horseshit. I'm sorry. I think that is such a misunderstanding and societal ridiculousness as far as I'm concerned, because people get to feel and people get to show their emotions.
Yes.
As long as it's not harming other people, people get to show those emotions. And I think
Yes.
it's really interesting when people judge about how others come across.
Well, and that's a sign of their own discomfort with their feelings, that they can't really respond to someone else having an experience without personalizing it. And that's too bad.
I recognize that now. Towards the beginning, I talked to another therapist in Australia and also my original surgeon here. She said, when you put it out there for everybody to hear, and that's what I do, you have to learn how to compartmentalize certain comments that are made. And so, and there's a lot. So going into this next question, what advice do you have for those dealing with an illness such as cancer?
Big capital letters, ask for help. Even if you consider yourself to be a person who doesn't ask for help.
That's me.
Ask for help. Yes, yes. And people, as a response, will say, just let me know what you need. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
Well, they're not going to do anything unless you are specific. That's just a statement. And when somebody says, hey, let me know what you need, you'd better have an answer. Yeah, you know what I need? I just need somebody to clean my bathroom.
Yeah.
When you're feeling well and are not dealing with a cancer diagnosis, you probably would never dream of having somebody clean your bathroom for you, other than ask somebody, hey, can you pick up my dry cleaning? Can you take my dog to the groomer? Whatever it is that you need, you have to be able to ask, and recognizing that it's what comes with the diagnosis is a responsibility to yourself and to those around you to be an advocate. You advocate for yourself, but also for your family, your friends, advocate for them. Make sure that your caregivers are getting what they need, time away, downtime, the ability to process their own feelings, whether it's on social media or with a therapist. However you do, it's okay. And don't be shy about talking about your fears. Don't be shy about your care. If there's something you need, ask for it. Create an action plan for your caregivers, for yourself. And I know that you did that and probably continue to do that. What do you need? What do you want? How do you feel? Just, again, all of that falls under the heading ask for help.
Yeah.
Don't think you can power through this alone. Some people can, but gosh, what a lonely thing that would be. And
Yes.
if you have people around you, that's kind of cool, because you never know when that other person's going to need you.
Right. Well, and just to speak on that, I was very lucky, and I still am very lucky to have the support group that I've had. I had this wonderful tribe of women who came together and helped me create this healing room. They got me all the supplies that I needed. So before this, I probably wouldn't have asked for help, because I'm just like, I'll do everything. I'm a multitasker. I'll just do it all.
Right.
So at first it was very, very difficult for me to ask for help. It just wasn't in my nature. But then I learned how to ask for help, and I did put it out there. Yes, I need meals. Yes, I need GoFundMe. Yes. And I asked my friend Paula one time, or can anyone go get me some lashes? Because I had lost my lashes. Can anyone go to the store and buy me some lashes? And also those caregivers need to learn how to ask for help too. Like my husband, he had a hard time the whole time we were getting meal train stuff. He had a hard time going, we don't need meals. I can do this. I can do that. I go, yes, we need meals. And so I encouraged him to also accept that help. And I am very, very fortunate for everything I received. And then about a month and a half ago, my really good friend, who was very instrumental in taking care of me this whole entire year, she's one of my very best friends. Well, she has cancer. And so now she just started treatment the day after my 1-year anniversary of the diagnosis. And so now she's going through this, and I'm going to be there for her. I'm there for all of it, just like she was there for all of it for me. And I understand it a lot better now because I've been through it. We kind of touched on this. I actually started touching on this about caregivers. What advice do you have for caregivers? And part of it, you were talking about, look, you need some downtime. You need to have that alone time. What else can you say about that?
I think it's important for caregivers to have a place to talk about their feelings and their fears, downtime. And when people are doing things like bringing meals, I think doing something like getting a facial. Of course, your husband probably wouldn't want to get a facial, but he might like to go hit a bucket of balls.
And he does that.
So giving him a gift to do something like that, reading materials, things to do while they're kind of hanging out. There are a number of things, but just be really aware that also with the diagnosis and treatment, the caregiver is right there. Their experience is very frightening as well.
Yeah.
And they often minimize that because they think, well, I'm not the one going through it. You are. I got to keep my feelings and my thoughts to myself. But even being able to talk about their fears, the dark thoughts, what if I lose my husband? Very real.
Yeah, and it's okay to cry together, which my husband and I have cried together. My husband, at the very beginning, right before I was going to get my port installed last July, I think it was late June 30th to be exact. I'll never forget it. I had a full-on meltdown in the parking lot. I was going in to get my PET scan, and later that day, I was going across town to get the port installed. And I was just in this whirlwind of craziness. And I think that was about the time when my husband's like, oh my God. How am I going to deal with this? Because I literally had a full-on temper tantrum, meltdown, craziness in the parking lot. He had to pick me up, I broke my water bottle. He had to bring me in, and I was like, I was just like, it was terrible. And so he's seen me go through all of these things. And I know that
Sure.
he thought that he had to stay strong, which in a sense, yes, he did. But I think that he thought that he had to stay strong all the time. And
Right.
the fact of the matter is that we can't just always be strong.
Well, strength looks a lot of different ways. I think it's really important to remember that is crying together doesn't mean there's a lack of strength and he's
Right.
not supporting you. It means that he's there with you. And sometimes that in and of itself is more important than being stoic and keeping the stiff upper lip, so to speak. So,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That makes total sense. Like, I think that crying with your spouse is strong.
Yes.
I mean, that's such a good way to look at it, Terianne. And the stoic part might be more the weak part. You have you have a few really good resources that we're going to put in the show notes. You've got Co-Surviving Cancer with Katie Brown, the Grief Recovery Handbook by John James, and then the Breast Year of My Life. I love that, by Sapida.
Sapida, yes. And grief recovery, let me just point out that that isn't just about a death. Grief is about living as well and grieving things that are different, grieving the person you were a year ago that has changed. I think there are a lot of different ways to frame grief. So I just wanted to point that out. It's not just about death.
The death. And yeah, because I grieved my breasts. I mean, I had to have my breasts
Yep.
amputated. And I was
Yep.
absolutely devastated when I found out that I had to do that. And luckily, the kind
Mhm.
of surgery that I had worked so well that I feel better than I had expected. But boy, oh boy, did I grieve the loss of my breasts.
Sure.
Co-Surviving Cancer.
That book is useful because it gives you lists. It gives you resources of different websites and other publications, but it also encourages people to make lists when you're in it and you don't really know what to do. I think sometimes it's helpful to write things down and follow a rubric.
And then the Breast Year of My Life.
Yes.
That sounds like a really good book that I should be.
And you probably will, knowing how you like to read.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I also have your email address and your phone number in there in case anyone needs to get a hold of you and wants to maybe just, if you're taking any clients, I don't know if you are, but if they have questions, I just really want to thank you for taking the time not only to accept me as your client. I couldn't be more thrilled in my experience with you. And again, with the audience, I really encourage people to reach out and find the therapist that would work well with, your life. And I would say be choosy, make sure that you have a really good connection with that person, and
Mhm.
don't do it alone. Not everyone has insurance. What do you suggest people do if they don't have insurance and they really need to speak to someone?
Well, a lot of therapists have sliding fee scales. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but many do.
Okay.
So that's also a possibility. I usually do a little bit of a sliding fee scale for clients who don't have insurance. There are also some good clinics. If you live in a town with a university, like Reno has a great counseling clinic right on the campus where they train future marriage and family therapists. And most large universities do have something like that. If you're a student, there's also student services at a university. So I think communities with a college or a university have a little bit of an advantage versus those who don't. But, often there are groups that are lower cost than seeing an individual therapist, which I think can be very effective, a
Mhm.
group setting. So, yeah, there are a lot of different avenues. If you've received a cancer diagnosis and you can't afford therapy, the first thing I would do is contact the American Cancer.
I have a
Yes.
nurse navigator at our hospital here, and they have resources for therapy and all kinds of things, wigs and whatever
Yeah.
you need. So that's a really good point. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just, again, Thank you for being here. I feel like we have given our audience a lot of great information. And to
Right.
my audience, thank you for joining. And we will see you next time on Test Those Breasts.
And thank you for having me, Jamie.
Thank you.